we were discussing about Bhutan yesterday. So I'll quickly just wrap up a couple of things on Bhutan and then we can take forward the discussion on Nepal. Come on. Now, if you look in terms of Bhutan, what I'd largely explained to you was this, that whatever the events have been ongoing in Bhutan, we've been looking at them largely from the perspective of Indian foreign policy, right? And if you look, what we were discussing yesterday was that historically there were compelling reasons why Bhutan turned towards India, as India and Bhutan shared certain similar concerns about Chinese aggression. Now, in the backdrop of the 1962 war, India-China relations witnessed a downturn, and you see that there was not much happening also on the front of China-Bhutan relations, that Bhutan had tilted towards India. Now, at least in 1965 and 1971, India's military victories partly reassured Bhutan that it had sided with the right party, as far as that India could play a role in guarding the sovereignty of Bhutan. Now, since the late 1980s, there have been boundary talks which have started between Bhutan and China. And what one sees is that China made additional claims in northern territories of Bhutan in addition to the Doklam situation, and offered a package deal to Bhutan, both in 1988 and then in 1998. And both the times, the Bhutanese side refused to enter into such a package deal, largely owing to India's concerns and partly also guided by the friendship treaty between India and Bhutan signed in 49, right? And it is this friendship treaty which was eventually revised in 2007 when Bhutan underwent partly a political transition also from a monarchy to a constitutional monarchy and a multi-party democracy. And the revision of the friendship treaty said that from being the elder brother and younger brother, it will now be a relationship between equal partners. And following that equal relationship, Bhutan will be free to engage with other countries on its own terms and expand its foreign relations with third countries. And that is what Bhutan did between 2008 to 12. However, in the Rio summit and the sidelines, I told you that on the first inkling that Bhutan was looking to engage China, India resorted to what we can call as partly a coercive aspect of diplomacy, as Bhutan apparently sought to engage China on the sidelines of the Rio summit. India's concern was, what is it that Bhutan is up to in its dealings with China? India did enforce a certain amount of, one could say, a blockade with respect to the supply of petroleum products and the election turn and all that which happened, I told you. Now, that's all till 2013 and all that. Now, since 2014, I told you the Indian Prime Minister, also the newly elected governments of 2014 and 2019 also paid a strong emphasis on maintaining a strong relationship with Bhutan. And that is also reflected in the fact that the elected Indian Prime Minister paid his first visit to Bhutan. Now, in the context of 2014 to 20, what has happened is this, that in 2014 to 20, what has happened are a number of developments. And please keep these developments in mind, because abhi, when we'll talk very quickly about Nepal, the same things will apply. Dekhiye, what is to be understood, whether it's not just 2014, to be more precise, it's actually since 2012 to 20. A certain number of things have been happening. Part of it is related to the Chinese assertion. Now, 2012 to 20, 2012 is when China made a formal announcement on the Belt and Road Initiative. It was in 2010 May they started talking about. 12 May they made a very formal announcement. Now, as they made a formal announcement, it was becoming evident that China intends to use the Belt and Road Initiative to achieve its strategic and economic objectives, as we had discussed before, right? The strategic and the economic objectives. And these strategic and economic objectives in South Asia would not just apply to a Sri Lanka or Pakistan, it would also apply to the Himalayan states of Bhutan and Nepal. Now, but as we'll see with Nepal, in Nepal, China relations, China and Nepal have maintained independent relations for a long time now. But Bhutan was almost a virgin land as far as China's diplomatic presence was concerned. So, how China approached Bhutan was something of extreme significance for India, keeping India's own strategic concerns in mind, right? India's own security concerns in mind. Now, what you see is at the same time, it is in this period after 2013, the Chinese assertiveness, if we were to say, on the border along India has increased. Now, it is not just Doklam or the current Galwan episode. There in 2013-14, there was the Chumar incident. Then there have been many other smaller incidents. There was a Daulatabad Oldie incident. Then there was the Chumar incident. Then there was the Doklam incident. And then there is the Galwan incidents, which is in 2020, your Doklam in 2017. The Daulatabad Oldie sector incident happened in 2014. Daulatabad Oldie is also in the same Aksai Chin area. Okay. Chumar is also in the same Aksai Chin area. It happened in 2013. So it's not one event of Chinese aggression which has happened. It is a pattern now from 2012-13 onwards till 2020. And this partly does overlap with what? China's launch of the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay. Now, so what I'm trying to tell you is that this Chinese assertiveness has been visible in a series of border standoffs. Along the India-China border. And out of these standoffs, which I just told you, the Chumar incident, the Daulatabad Oldie, Daulat Beg Oldie it's called, both of them are in the Aksai Chin region, or the Doklam incident of 2017, or which incident? Your Galwan episode, 2020. So there is a clear pattern that you see, and that has happened, and so on. So what is out of these, the events of Doklam were the ones which tested the India-Bhutan relationship. You have to understand that the Doklam episode happened where? At the Tri-Junction area in the Chumbi Valley region, and this is where it tested the India-Bhutan relationship. Basically, the Chinese troops entered into the Chumbi Valley and they were doing construction in the Chumbi Valley. And what happened at this time? Bhutan objected, and Bhutan and Indian troops intervened on the behalf of Bhutan. Okay, so it is in the 2017 incident. You don't need the details, but the long and short of this is this: as the Chinese infrastructure construction activities received or were carried out in the Chumbi Valley region, Indian troops intervened on behalf of Bhutan. Now, China said that it is a matter between whom? China and Bhutan. India's intervention is a territorial aggression into territories which are claimed by China, and which is a matter of dispute between China and Bhutan. According to the Chinese, India had no role in the intervention. India, on the other hand, argued that India is intervening on behalf of Bhutan as determined also by Bhutan's request and also guided by the Friendship Treaty of 2007. Okay, so India gave its own arguments as to why we are intervening. Also, India said that it will change the status quo in the Tri-Junction area Chinese infrastructure construction in the Chumbi Valley will change the status quo in the Tri-Junction area, which will have severe security implications for India. So India gave its own reasons why it needs to intervene in Doklam. But the crux of the matter was India said India is intervening on behalf of Bhutan. Okay. And it is guided by the Friendship Treaty of 2007. Now, it is at this time, Bhutan, on the other hand, maintained, it issued a couple of statements, but by and large maintained a silence. It did not go overboard criticizing China, nor did any other country, and this is the point. By 2017 also, there is the talk of Quad. Indo-Pacific has been talked about. USA is talking about dealing with Chinese assertiveness. The Japanese are also talking about dealing with Chinese assertiveness, and so on. However, when the Doklam episode happened, there was no major UN Security Council resolution or any statement in support of India issued by any of the major Western powers. Okay, when it came to the Doklam question, apart from a few statements made by the Japanese side, there was no major statement made by the United States or any other major P5 member on the Doklam incident. And it was largely up to India to actually deal with the situation. Now that the situation lasted for a good 2.5 months, 70 days. And during these 70 days, there were many news reports which came, which said that the Chinese are making offer to Bhutan, that Bhutan must back off. And in return, China will provide financial aid to Bhutan, will provide all sorts of incentives to Bhutan if Bhutan backs off out of Doklam. Because if Bhutan issues the statement that it will resolve the issue bilaterally with China, then there is no ground for Indian intervention in the Chumbi Valley. But despite pressure and possible incentives being offered to Bhutan, Bhutan did not issue a statement which could question Indian troop presence in Doklam. Okay. So while Bhutan did not go all the way overboard to strongly keep criticizing China, it did not question the relevance of Indian troop presence in Doklam either. Okay. So Bhutan was trying to partly balance, but it was clear that it was tilted towards India. It is tilted towards India in the sense that it is not saying that why are you present in our territory or our claimed territory. So this incident was one thing which made Bhutan realize that this incident is in a line of incidences which have been happening on the India-China border. And Doklam may be the one incident, but it is not the only incident. And since then, you see, another has happened in Galwan, which is an even bigger incident, right, involving killing of Indian and Chinese troops and a much longer standoff now. Now, it is clear that the pressure on the India-China border is increasing, and such a pressure is going to play out in some of these Himalayan countries as well. As we'll discuss in case of Nepal, there is what we call as the Kalapani dispute along the Lipu Lake, Limpu Darya sector. There's a Kalapani dispute. That also is partly happening because of China. Not completely, but partly because of China. What is clear to the Indian side is that, and to many of these players, is how India responds to China will determine their behavior in terms of balancing between India and China. After the Galwan incident and that prolonged standoff, finally Bhutan has entered into a memorandum of understanding with China, and under this MOU they will sooner or later allow either the Chinese to open an embassy in Bhutan. Now India's concern is that if the Chinese establish their presence in Bhutan in a major way, then Bhutan may either go the Pakistan way or it may go the Sri Lanka way, land itself in a debt trap vis-a-vis China, and that will have what? A security implication for India. Now, can India stop Bhutan from entering into diplomatic or friendly relations with China? Most probably the answer is no. If India does a repeat of what it did in 2012, it will what? It will turn the public sentiment in Bhutan against India. that India is resorting to what arm twisting of Bhutan, that India is not respecting the sovereignty of Bhutan, that Bhutan, I mean, India would not like that if any other country imposes sanctions on India, if India engages with any third country. For example, even on India buying Russian oil right now, they've heard, India said that India is well within its right to buy Russian oil because the sanctions on Russia are not UN sanctions, right? It are sanctions imposed by USA. So no country would want that its decision-making freedom of maintaining relations with other countries is dictated by any other country. So there is a good possibility that India will not find it very easy to coerce Bhutan in the future of not entering into any relations with China. So what is to be understood is that in the coming decade of 2020 to 30, sooner or later the day will arrive when China will establish its diplomatic presence in Bhutan. China is already sending a large number of tourists in Bhutan. China is the third major trade partner of Bhutan after India and South Korea. Okay, there is the Buddhism connect as well, right, between them also. So sooner or later the Chinese will enter into Bhutan and will establish their trade presence and would want to rope Bhutan in as a part of the Belt and Road Initiative as well. The question is, what can India do? So what can India do is that India must further deepen its engagement with Bhutan and give Bhutan more reasons to continue close cooperation with India. One is the logic of geography, is that for their access to sea, what Bhutan will continue to depend on India. There is no alternative sea access that Bhutan can get through China. Okay, it's even if it is going to be possible, it will be so expensive that it will become unviable. Secondly, is the idea of what is called as the SAARC electricity grid, or if not a SAARC electricity grid, the idea of electricity grid connecting the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal region, BBIN region. That Bhutan produces electricity. Now India, if you know already, is surplus in producing electricity. We produce more electricity than we need today, and though you may still face power cuts, but that is because of transmission and distribution. देखिए, एक तो energy generation, एक है through transmission networks distributing energy or electricity in rural areas, etc. Our transmission and distribution structure is weak, but we are generating enough electricity now. So India, and if you look at this, if I was to just tell you, if this is India, and you know why I'm telling you this, because ये बाद में भी use होगा, Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh. Is when you look at Bangladesh, have you read? You've done Bangladesh, right? So you may have, otherwise, if not also, I'll anyways discuss the China factor in Bangladesh separately. So if you know already, is India selling electricity to Bangladesh? India is selling electricity to Bangladesh through the state of West Bengal as well as through the state of Tripura. Through both these states, India is selling something around 600 megawatts of electricity each. So India is already selling somewhat 1200 megawatts of electricity to Bangladesh. Okay, because the Indian electricity grid and the Bangladesh electricity grid is interconnected. India is also selling something around 500 megawatts of electricity to Nepal. And India buys a significant amount of electricity from Bhutan, even though India does not need to buy some of this electricity now, because we are energy surplus. Till 2010-15, 14, we were still a bit behind in production, but now we are energy surplus. We don't need to buy that electricity, but we are still purchasing it because of the larger strategic dimension. Okay, Bhutan's electricity is anyways produced by hydropower, whereas most of India's electricity is anyways produced by coal. Like, we live on coal, right? We are going to live on coal. We are going to die on coal. There is no way India will be able to reduce its energy dependence on coal for the next 30 years at least. By 2050 also, at least 50% of India's energy will come from coal. Renewable energy एक टॉपिक है आपके सिलेबस में, एंड एनर्जी ही एक टॉपिक है पेपर 3 में, उसमें भी इश्यूज एंड चैलेंजेस इन अपस्केलिंग रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी इज गोइंग टू बी एन इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक जीएस के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से भी, तो वो एक अलग कहानी है. बट देर आर कंपेलिंग रीजंस व्हाई कोल विल कंटिन्यू टू पावर इंडियाज एनर्जी मिक्स फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम. Sources like hydropower are relatively cleaner sources. So Bhutan partly offers some of that clean energy to India, but that's not really the concern. The concern is that so the point here that I'm trying to make is that India's electricity grid is already connected with Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh. Nepal has huge hydropower generation potential, though it doesn't generate right now. In fact, it is an energy deficit country. It buys electricity from India. In fact, Nepal buys electricity from India. Nepal has a potential of generating almost 60,000 megawatts of electricity. Okay. It can generate so much of that electricity, hydropower based, because of such large number of rivers crisscrossing Nepal. And then it can use that electricity and sell it to other countries which need to buy electricity. Okay. Now, this is a policy issue. Till we keep ourselves addicted to coal, we are not going to buy this electricity. You reduce your coal mix, you will be buying electricity from other sources. But forget India for a minute. You look at Bangladesh. Bangladesh is an energy deficit country. It almost faces power outages of 6 hours to 8 hours every day, and it requires, outside Dhaka and a couple of other cities, it requires a large amount of electricity. Why? Because of the manufacturing sector. Dhaka or Bangladesh is today witnessing phenomenal growth in manufacturing, especially in the textile sector, in the garment sector, and in manufacturing in general. Okay. And for firing its industries, it requires electricity, and it doesn't generate enough electricity. So there are surplus countries in the region like Bhutan, like possibly in the future Nepal, and through India they can sell electricity to whom? Bangladesh. They can sell electricity to India, they can sell electricity to Bangladesh, Nepal, elsewhere. If this is called the idea of what we call as the idea of a SAARC electricity grid. Okay, meaning that if you interconnect all the, मतलब अब SAARC में तो technically पाकिस्तान भी आता है और अफगानिस्तान भी आता है ना, तो वो हो ना हो, because I told you in 2014 also there was a proposal that India will supply electricity to Pakistan by interconnecting with the grids, and which is easily doable, but obviously that has not happened. So forget a SAARC electricity grid, but a regional interconnected electricity grid is definitely possible. It will help Bhutan find new markets for its produced electricity. It will help Bangladesh also. It will give more reasons to whom? Bangladesh. It will give, more reasons to Bhutan or even to Bangladesh to not antagonize whom? India. Because if you are getting your electricity from India or through India, you don't want to what? Have hostile relations, or one could say relations with large number of irritants with whom? India. The logic of here is this, that geography favors whom? India. Can Nepal and Bhutan do trade with Bangladesh or with each other without India? No. Whether it is road based connectivity through highways or it is electricity, everything has to go through India. So they have all the reasons to engage whom? India. And to that extent, if India is able to provide this level of interconnectedness, whether through highways or through electricity trade, it is going to tie them economically to India and thus strengthen India's presence in these countries. देखिए, एक बार pattern आएगा that if there is any country, whether it's a Nepal or a Bhutan or elsewhere, which are important for India, or a Myanmar, which are important for India. Myanmar's example was a bit more different example. One way of tackling the Chinese presence is what? That saying to Nepal and Bhutan that if you establish relations with China, then we will punish you by imposing some economic cost or political cost on the rulers. That idea is option number one, and it is the idea of coercive diplomacy, which may or may not work. These countries will take the matter to UN, will criticize India in SAARC, will raise voice against India if we force them to what? To not establish relations with whom? China. On the contrary, if India works with like-minded partners and or alone also and provides them viable alternatives, which provides them infrastructure or other needs, or takes care of their infrastructure needs or gives them market for their goods, then they have all the reasons to continue favoring India. Because anyways, as compared to China, geography favors their closer relationship with India. So the task for India is not that big, or it's not impossible to attain. It is challenging. Why? Because China is a $13 trillion economy and we are a $3 trillion economy. Okay. So there is a difference in the size of Chinese economy and their ability to shell out money for infrastructure development, for loans, for aids, for grants. So while the sheer economic size of China gives it a head start over India, but India's people to people or cultural relations, geographical location of these countries vis-a-vis India, and the potential for India to provide them market, say through SAARC electricity grid or interconnectedness of roads and railways, is also something which can greatly ensure that Indian interests are not bypassed by whom? Bhutan or Nepal while engaging China. Okay. So that's considered a more reliable way of doing things. Please understand, one is a more carrot based approach, other is a more stick based approach. The stick based approach is not considered by scholars as a very viable approach because I told you in the beginning of 1950s, it was the threat of Chinese assertion that shifted many of these countries for closer engagement with India. If India follows a similar coercive approach, there is reason that many of these countries may consider tilting towards China. So we should not push them too hard so that they start tilting towards China. That's definitely for Bhutan. The Nepali political elites are a different crop altogether, as we'll see. Also, in case of Bhutan, the monarchy has strongly favored close relations with India. Okay, so there is enough reason to believe that Bhutan and India will continue to be close partners for the foreseeable future. That's one. Secondly, the Chinese presence will increase in Bhutan. And for that, what India needs to do is do things like interconnecting electricity grids, providing them further markets for selling their goods either to India or through India to other regional partners. That is all that India can do. And continue engaging Bhutan to ensure that even while they settle the border question with whom? China, they keep Indian sensitivities on Doklam in mind. Okay, if that is true, happen. और उसके पहले देखिए अगर लड़ाई हो गई कभी जम के गनघोर बिटवीन इंडिया एंड, ये सब तो लिखने के लिए है, बट इफ देयर इज अ रियल फ्लैश आउट ऑफ अ वॉर बिटवीन इंडिया एंड चाइना of a similar nature of the 1962 war, then whoever wins, Bhutan will tilt towards them. Okay, it as Ambassador P. Stobden used to say that Bhutan is like an egg between two rocks. Okay, any one side pushes it too hard, it is likely to crumble. Okay, and Bhutan has to pay a difficult task of balancing its relations with these two big neighbors. So that's there. Also, the last thing that I told you yesterday, have you received this handout also? Okay, so if you look at this handout, I've given most of the things here. Also remember I told you the Chinese side have raised claims in eastern sector after 2017. They have raised claims in the eastern sector also. So where in the Sakting Wildlife Sanctuary region. So one was the Doklam region, the other was the northern region, one was the northwest, and after 2016 they've raised, 2017 they've raised claims in east also, which is very close to Tawang. Tawang is here. Sorry. This is where Tawang is. So very close to Tawang. And in response, the Indian side has said this, that we want to build road link going through the Sakting Wildlife Sanctuary to Tawang. Okay. So that we can quickly mobilize troops on this tri-junction. एक tri-junction उनके east पे है, एक west पे है. Okay. So this is the larger story. So if you were to probably just write a few lines on the challenges and the way forward, you can write that. देखिए इतना ही पढ़ना होता है इन टॉपिक्स में, और मैं आपको बता दूं अगले 1-2 साल में कुछ नहीं बदलने वाला है, इससे ज्यादा कुछ होना नहीं है अभी. ओके. One thing is also, if I was to tell you, for countries like Bhutan, and especially, if you look at Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Pakistan, the COVID-19 has devastated or has had a negative impact on the economy of all countries. And in cases of some countries, more than others. Now, Sri Lanka is one example of how COVID, देखिए, मैं बार बार कहता हूँ COVID के बारे में, COVID, there is a certain cost associated with the virus. But virus killed less number of people. It exposed the flaws in the existing political, social and economic systems of society, which killed more number of people. Okay. In the sense that ultimately there are some countries which did much better in fighting against COVID than others. Countries which had a strong focus on primary healthcare, who had a functional healthcare system, who had spent a considerable portion of the GDP on healthcare for strengthening their healthcare systems. Okay. They did better. Countries which had social welfare schemes already in place, so that if there was a lockdown to be imposed, you could provide food, shelter, etc. to your population. So countries which did not have many of these things in place, there were the ones who bore the brunt of the virus, right? So to some satisfaction of India, that India did have at least a certain degree of capacity in making pharmaceuticals and vaccines. So that is why we did manage to make certain number of vaccines and procure others and still provide some of that. It's another thing that everything else apart from that in our healthcare system did not work. I remember last year, I live very close to Gangaram, okay, like on the other side of the road. And like during the second wave, I was also the same time, the holy time and all, I was also ill. And then I was like, the first 3-4 days were okay. I was like, okay, it's a vacation, let's watch TV. Right. So after that, the next 9-10 days were very tough. But long story cut short, I would hear कि Gangaram में, there's all pitch dark silence. The only noise you would hear day in day out of ambulances going into Gangaram and coming out. But those who could manage to reach Gangaram were elites, and those who couldn't, they were never to be counted. And obviously, they are the ones who are forgotten also. So obviously, there will be no files, COVID files. They will never be. Okay. So that is a story to be forgotten anyways. So, but what I'm trying to say is, it had a severe economic cost also for all countries, including for India. But more so for countries like Bhutan, which are heavily dependent on tourism, or for countries like Nepal, the economic cost is going to be even more severe. And the more economically vulnerable they are, the more likely they are going to be feeling the need to take loans from whom? China. So for China, sitting on a huge pile of economic reserves, it offers an opportunity to make countries or to ensure that vulnerable countries tilt towards China. Okay. So one thing, positive thing that India did during COVID to not cede ground to China was vaccine diplomacy. Vaccine diplomacy was something that partly worked to India's advantage. We were the first ones to provide vaccines to Bhutan, to Nepal, to Sri Lanka. पाकिस्तान ने भी ले ही ली थी फिर थोड़ा बहुत शर्म के मारे कि है नहीं देने को, कोई और दे भी नहीं रहा है, ले लेते हैं थोड़ा सा, राइट? सो बट this was an important point. Why? Because we have to be seen in South Asia. If India wants to ensure its dominance or be the predominant power in South Asia, it has to show leadership in South Asia. And that means providing economic support, humanitarian support, or developmental support. But for that, the Indian economy needs to be also doing well. So how fast India recovers from COVID, how fast the Indian economy recovers from COVID. Some of you may say, sir, what nonsense, India has already recovered from COVID. Indian economy, 22% growth from last quarter. Then somebody said, it's a base effect. नीचे इतना गया है, अब यहां से ऊपर तो कोई भी जा सकता है, right? So you would have that Q4 growth is this percent, that percent. So what I'm trying to say is that this means that the coming couple of years, and for countries like Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka are going to be extremely tough financially. And India needs to ensure that these have viable options to China, or else they will have all the reasons to tilt towards China. So आप लिख लीजिए, COVID has made things difficult for many of these countries. So in terms of challenges and way forward, one country which is a success case in South Asia after India in terms of economic growth is Bangladesh. Every other economy, more or less, Bhutan is an exception, but countries like Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all are basket cases when it comes to their economic management. The challenges and way forward for India-Bhutan relationship. The recent signing of a 3-point MOU between China and Bhutan in 2021 with respect to the border question has raised concerns in New Delhi. Has raised concerns in New Delhi. In the light of China's new claims, in the light of China's new claims along the eastern sector, new territorial claims along the eastern sector of Bhutan. In the light of China's new territorial claims along the eastern sector of Bhutan, adjoining the Tawang sector, made since 2017. The Doklam episode again of 2017 and the Galwan incident of 2020, the Indian concerns about the Indian concerns about Chinese aggression are valid or stand validated. About Chinese aggression stand validated. Chinese concerns stand validated. It is possible that the coming decade, it is possible that the coming decade may see China-Bhutan relations may see the deepening of China-Bhutan relations. May see the deepening of China-Bhutan relations. Actually, Bhutan is set to enter into the WTO also and many other things. Basically, it is possible that the coming decade may see the deepening of China-Bhutan relations, and China may seek to rope Bhutan in its Belt and Road Initiative. Bhutan is the only Belt and Road Initiative. Bhutan is the only other country in South Asia apart from India which has objected to joining the BRI. Apart from India, only Bhutan has objected to joining BRI. Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal all have joined the Belt and Road Initiative. India has not joined. One of the primary reasons India says is that because the Belt and Road Initiative's key artery of the China-Pakistan economic corridor passes through the Gilgit-Baltistan region, which is a territory claimed by India, and this project runs or violates India's territorial integrity. So India cannot join such a project. So while India did not attend the BRI conferences, the same was a stand taken by Bhutan, and Bhutan is the only other country in South Asia which has refused to join the Belt and Road Initiative. It is possible that in the future, as they deepen their relationship, probably settle their border, Bhutan may also enter into the Belt and Road Initiative. So, and see, Bhutan and China may seek to rope Bhutan in its Belt and Road Initiative. India is thus looking at the prospects. India is thus looking at the prospects of increasing Chinese presence in Bhutan and thus needs to take relevant steps to safeguard its strategic interests vis-a-vis whom? China in Bhutan. What steps? I told you. India needs to achieve what? An early operationalization of an interconnected electricity grid including Bhutan, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and other BIMSTEC members, which can include Myanmar as well. Remember, from India's northeast, Myanmar is, directly contiguous. So, including the other BIMSTEC members, and operationalization of an interconnected electricity grid will meet electricity demands, will provide a market to their Bhutani electricity exports in South Asia through India. The other thing is that what India needs to do is something that we often lag behind is speedy completion of outstanding what? Hydropower projects in Bhutan. देखिए, there are a number of these hydropower projects in Bhutan, like the Pungtangshu 1 and 2, and then there is another project that has been talked about recently, Saptkoshi. These are all 1000 megawatts each project. Now Indian companies are executing them. It's important that they do execute them in time. ऐसा नहीं है कि it should take decades, because if it takes decades, the cost of the projects will increase. Okay, and more so, as the cost of project increases, who has to bear the cost of project? Bhutan. Ultimately, who is executing it? Indian companies. Okay, and Bhutan, देखिए एकदम simple है. ये Bhutan वालों का बड़ा simple concern है. They're like, look, who is constructing the dams? Indian companies. Who has to be paid? Indian companies. Who has to pay? Bhutan. If there is a delay, the cost overrun, meaning who has to pay more? Bhutan. But who is executing? Indian company. So it is in India's interest that we partly learn from China's playbook and implement whatever needs to be implemented in time. We cannot just keep crying that the Chinese are what? Expanding their presence. The Chinese are expanding their presence partly because they are good at implementing infrastructure projects. If you have to compete with China, you have to complete those infrastructure projects in time, so that India, so there's a very popular saying in South Asia, India talks, China delivers. Okay, हम ये कर देंगे, वो कर देंगे, वो कर देंगे. तो देखिए, there are certain jumlas which work domestically, there are certain which don't work in the international level. Okay, so beyond that point, if you are unable to deliver on these infrastructure projects, then you are definitely going to cede space to China. So these are some of the things which need to be ensured if India needs to further deepen its relations with Bhutan. And clearly, what India must not do is India should not resort to coercive diplomacy. should not resort to coercive diplomacy with respect to Bhutan. India should not resort to coercive diplomacy with respect to Bhutan with the intent of limiting or with the intent of preventing them from establishing relations with whom? China. India should not resort to coercive diplomacy with respect to Bhutan with the intention of preventing them from establishing relations with China. This is there. Also, as I said, as the way forward is also this, that India should continue to press upon Bhutan its concerns over the security aspect and the tri-junction area. So India can always be vocal about it, and also geography favors a closer alignment of Bhutan with India. So that's all. That's about Bhutan. Anything you want to ask on Bhutan? Any questions that you have? Okay. There is a handout. Next topic that I'm going to आपको पूछना था बाद में पूछ सकते ऐसा कुछ नहीं. Next topic that will start is India Nepal. For India Nepal also there will be a handout that will probably get it tomorrow. So India नेपाल बहुत जबरदस्त कंट्री लगती है मेरे को नेपाल, because firstly they are the experts at playing the China card. Everybody has learned from them. They were the first ones who started the practice of saying to India that, look, if you don't address our concerns, we have other friends in the region, and they are China. Okay, so they and the Nepali political elites are again also very expert at doing politics. देखिए, again, if you even if you do India-Nepal relations, what are the things that you need to do? Again, as I told you, the significance of the relationship is the first thing that we should focus on. Then the key, a brief historical context. Then the key issues and challenges, and then the way forward. Right? बहुत सिंपल और सॉर्टेड है ये. देखिए, सिग्निफिकेंस से चालू करते हैं. Okay. Now, what is the significance of Nepal to India? Partly similar to what is the significance of Bhutan to India. But there are a couple of other points as well. देखिए, so if you look, at Nepal, let me firstly give you a broader context of the geography of Nepal. क्या है यहाँ से? There are so many rivers, right, which are tributaries of the Ganga, and they go and feed into the Ganga system. Now, when you look at these rivers, one of the things to know about Nepal is it is a hill state where there are hills also towards the Himalayas, to the upper parts of Nepal. And यहाँ पे what is this region? The Terai region or the plains. So it's called the Terai region, and this is called the hill region. Basic terminology है समझने के लिए नेपाल को. ये terminology सिर्फ हवा में नहीं है. It's not just a geographical differentiation, but it also has impacts on the politics and the economy of Nepal. So let me give you that broad context. Before 1814, इनफैक्ट छोड़िए वो भी उतना मत जाइए आप. बिफोर यू सी इन ब्रिटिश इंडिया, छोड़िए, द ब्रिटिश इंडिया फॉट वॉर्स विथ नेपाल. Okay? British India did fight wars with Nepal initially and eventually converted Nepal into a protectorate, where Nepal continued to be an independent kingdom ruled by its native rulers, but under the overall guidance of the foreign policy of British. Okay, so it was not a part of British India. What? Nepal. It continued to be an independent state, and Nepal like Bhutan were not colonized directly by whom? British. And the Nepali consider it as a part of their political pride that they have not been colonized even by the British. So there is that tradition of guarding their own sovereignty. Okay, that is there. Now that's one context. Similarly, in the Nepal region, there is the Terai region and the hill region. Now in the hill region stay who are called as the Bahun Kshetris. The Bahun Kshetris come from the Brahmin and the Kshatriya, the upper castes, okay, in Nepal, and they are predominantly coming from the hill region. All the members of the Nepali royal monarchy, to their prime ministers, to their chiefs of the army staff, have historically been from the Bahun Kshetri community. Okay, they are the hill people. Okay, whereas the Terai region is composed of a large number of people who live in the plains, and these Terai region people are the ones who have been previously a part of, had relations with the states of Awadh, Bihar. So whether it is in Awadh or in Bihar, many a portion of Terai territories were previously a part of British India, and the British gave the control of some of these territories to Nepal under the Treaty of Segoli, etc. More importantly, people who live in the Terai region, they had marital, linguistic and deeper cultural links with the Indian side of the border. This is called, or in fact, S.D. Muni calls that between Nepal and India, there is the Beti Roti ka rishta. In the sense that the Beti aspect here refers to the marital linkages. That people who live in the Terai region of Nepal have deep marital linkages with people living on the Indian side of the border in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Okay, so much so that a large number of them are married on the Indian side of border as well. This is not just about Terai people also. Up till the last decade or so, almost a large number of the Nepali political elites, even the Bahun Kshetris, have been married into the Indian political elites. Okay, in the sense, for example, Karan Singh, the son of coming from the royal family of Jammu and Kashmir, Hari Singh, and then Karan Singh. Karan Singh was also one of the nephews of a part of the royal family of of Nepal. Similarly, many Indian ambassadors to Nepal, they have also married, or their family members have been married into the Nepali Bahun Kshetri political elites. So marital linkages are there in Terai region also, and amongst the elites of Bahun Kshetris on the Indian side in the past. Apart from this Terai region people, from the times of where? British India, have been finding employment where? Have been finding employment in India. Also from the time of the British, the Gorkha regiment has been a part of the Indian army. Now the Gorkha regiment played an important role in crushing the 1857 rebellion also on behalf of the British. And since the time of British, the Gorkha regiment has been there, which includes soldiers from the Bahun Kshetri region also and elsewhere also. This Gorkha regiment continues to be a part of the Indian army even today. There are 35,000 Nepali soldiers who serve in the Indian army currently. And once they serve their tenure, they go back to Nepal and continue to receive pensions from India. And that talks about, that's a big thing for a country like Nepal. देखिए 35,000 जो नौकरियां, अब यहाँ आपके 800 से 1000 हो जाती हैं, आप बोलते हैं सर हाईएस्ट एवर इंक्रीज ब्ला ब्ला ब्ला, है ना, 800 से 1000 हो गई, आपको लगा यही 200 जो बची हैं इन्हीं में मेरा नंबर आएगा. So it's a one time increase, है ना, the Indian Railway Management Service, it's a one time increase that has happened for this year. But 35,000 is a big number. Cumulatively, when these people retire and go on pensions, Nepal is a country whose economy is, to say simply, in shambles. Okay, it is a total mess. It is a case of gross economic mismanagement, Nepali economy. In that economy, to get salaried jobs for 35,000 people, meaning 35,000 families, and then pensions year after year for people who retire, Ambassador Shyam Saran argues that these Gorkha soldiers are the ones who are the bedrock of India-Nepal relationship, because they will never allow the Nepali political elites to antagonize India too much, because who's providing them employment? India. And this is formal employment. Apart from this, almost 1.5 million Nepali people find employment in India in other sectors. Okay. So this is formal employment, but beyond that, आपको ये भी पता हो UPSC में भी Nepali people can write exam, maybe not for grade A for certain services, up to grade B and उसके नीचे तो they can. And India and Nepal have largely followed what we call as an open border. And that open border means what? That Nepali citizens can come, find employment in India, stay in India, reside in India, find employment in India, even if they do not have CAA or NRC. कोई जरूरत नहीं है. Nepali people, who is stealing away India's jobs? Nepali people. Who's stealing away Indians' jobs? Nepali people, reservation, Bangladesh. Everybody is stealing away jobs of common Indians, right? All crap. ठीक है, चलिए छोड़िए, क्या करना है, आपको नौकरी करनी है, आप ढूंढ लीजिए जहां मिले, मेरे को करनी नहीं है. क्या? So what I'm trying to tell you is that the fact that 1.5 to 2 million Nepali citizens find employment in India, in addition to these 35,000 soldiers, what is this? This is the roti ka rishta. That the people to people relationship between India and Nepal is so strong that for the foreseeable future, the Nepali political elites cannot ignore India. So here is the thing. You have to understand that when India's smaller neighboring states and their citizens, if they find employment in India, you may say that they are stealing away your jobs. But you look from the, if that's the case, I'm saying there's a big if there also, but even if that is assumed to be true, then also there's a larger strategic angle being served, and that is what? That it ensures that these countries continue to maintain good relations with India because of their certain dependence for gainful employment on whom? India. Okay. So that's the angle. Because a number of times it has been said that this open border between India and Nepal must be closed. But no strategic thinker or foreign policy expert says that this border must be closed. Because it is this beti roti ka rishta which is not there between whom? Nepal and China. होगा उनका रोड, सड़क, हाईवे, कुछ भी, but we bring to the table what they don't bring. So you cannot give up on your strength. देखिए रोड और हाईवे तो हमसे वैसे ही नहीं बनता है, ठीक है, जो है वो भी if you close down, then it is not a very wise move in foreign policy terms. So what I have indirectly told you, the strategic significance of whom? India to Nepal, partly. That it is a source of gainful employment for Nepali citizens. Secondly, obviously, Nepal is a landlocked country. For their access to sea, they require India, right? So that is there. And the third is that in case of a future possible Chinese aggression, Nepal has or can have certain meeting of minds vis-a-vis India, as it was there in the past. Like in 1950 to 60, Nepal and India saw China through the same lens. It is not the case anymore. While Bhutan, China has settled its border with Nepal. It has not settled its border with Bhutan. Nepal-China border is largely settled. कुछ खास नहीं है वहां dispute. Nepal currently doesn't view China from the point of view as a security threat as much as Bhutan views China. Nepal is already a part of the Belt and Road Initiative of China, which is not the case with Bhutan. So, India's concerns today with Nepal are twofold. One is that India's concern is that India would want that to ensure that India-Nepal relationships get over the current period of friction. In fact, we'll see that Nepali politicians, देखिए बड़ा सिंपल है. Nepal is an underdeveloped country in education, in literacy, in healthcare, and every dimension. And how do Nepali politicians explain the underdevelopment of Nepal? They say, we are not landlocked, we are India-locked. It is India which is preventing the economic development of Nepal. कोई सेंस है इस बात की? बट उन्हें पूरी लग रही है, राइट, कि ये पूरी सेंसिबल बात है. Nepali politicians say that Nepal's economy is not developing because India doesn't allow them to do trade with third countries. Nepal's industries are not developing because they need to what? Take pride through India. India does not provide them what? Ports. Nepal doesn't have electricity because India doesn't cooperate with Nepal in construction of dams. Okay. So there is a habit in Nepal of and Nepali political elites of blaming whom? India for almost all of their economic problems. And this is what we call that Nepali politicians in their domestic politics have made India punching bag. Every time any party is in the ruling or in the opposition, they say whatever challenges they are facing, it's because of India. So, ये तो इतना है. So, can they deal with India on their own? No. But ये तो हमें पता है ना. In Nepal, the Nepali politicians say that Nepal needs a strong leader which can stand up against India. Pakistan needs a strong leader which can stand up against India. It's a common narrative in South Asia in many of these countries to argue that the country needs strong leader to stand up against India. India needs a strong leader to stand up against China. Politics in many of these countries works on certain similar patterns, and this is one of those patterns. Okay. Often this narration about having strong leaders is as if leaders are going on the battlefield to fight wars. That era where kings used to go on the battlefield to fight wars is gone, right? But still, as if, for making decisions, so basically the strategic significance of Nepal is partly the same as Bhutan, but the Nepal is a complicated challenge because the Chinese are already present in Nepal. Okay, that's there, and that's from the strategic perspective. And also, please understand that as of now, given that if Nepal possibly completely tilts towards China, which is not very easy for Nepal to do because of geography, right? Because the fact that they are, लेकिन अभी मैं आपको बताऊंगा आगे कि the Chinese are building railways into Nepal. The Chinese are building railways into Nepal, connecting through Tibet, and Chinese are saying we will do trade through Tibet with Nepal, but that is going to be extremely expensive for them to do. So while geography still favors India Nepal relationship, but if Nepal was to tilt towards China, it will be a major headache for India. Okay. And the Nepali politicians have the potential of doing so. Okay. Because they are experts at playing the India card or playing the China card against India. One example of that is what you call as, ये जो अभी काला पानी डिस्प्यूट हो रहा है, देखिए नेपाल में नौकरी नहीं है, खाने को नहीं है, जॉब नहीं है, बट नेपाली पॉलिटिशियन से इंडिया इज इंक्रोचिंग ऑन नेपाली टेरिटरी विच इज वेयर along the Kalapani dispute. Okay. And basically along the, I'll show you the map, basically along the rivers, the Kalapani river and the territories around it. So basically there is this small patch, it's not a big patch also, it's a very small patch of land which is apparently a disputed territory between Nepal and India. The Limpu Lake, the Kalapani region is close to the Pithoragarh district in Uttarakhand. Okay. And it is from here, apparently Nepal is saying that this region belongs to Nepal. Whereas this region has been under the control of India. It is Indian population which lives in these regions also. Okay. And India has in the recent past constructed, over the last 10 years, managed to construct what? Another alternative route, as I'll explain to you later, for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra through the Kalapani region. Kailash Mansarovar Yatra through the Kalapani region. There is an existing route which goes from where? From the Sikkim region. Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. It's a much longer route. Okay. Now this route, the new route which has been constructed through the Kalapani region, is a much shorter route. But we are not really concerned about tourists going to Kailash Mansarovar. The same route can be used by troops in the case of a larger India-China conflict. So India has constructed a new route which is a shorter route along this tri-junction of India, Nepal and China. Now China has no claims in Kalapani. Here is the twist. China has no claims in Kalapani. But Nepal has certain potential claims in Kalapani. Around the same time, when these Doklam and many of these incidents have been happening, and now after that the Galwan incident has happened, the Nepali side has raised strong voices on Kalapani. And India views that Nepal's newfound assertion on Kalapani and territories around it is on the behest of China. That it is the Chinese who are prompting the Nepali political elites to pick a bone with India on Kalapani. Part of it is because of the new route which has been constructed for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra along the tri-junction of India, Nepal and Bhutan in the western sector. Okay. So ये सारी कहानी है. What it does tell is that Nepali politicians have found a new issue to raise what? Against India, and saying that India is encroaching on Nepali territory. So technically speaking, it's a very small territory which is not a major issue, but it assumes significance in the light of what is China doing in the region. Okay, because this is an issue which has come to prominence while the Chinese are asserting themselves anyways along different parts of the India-China border. So we do not want sore points in additional friction points in the India-Nepal relationship in the context of larger India-China relationship. So what we should do strategically, why Nepal is important, is that Nepal must not create additional obstacles for whom? India. That is it. In return, what are we giving to Nepal? An open Indian market where Nepali citizens can find employment, and also the possibility in the future that Nepal if it develops its hydropower sector, can sell electricity to India and through India to other countries and use Indian ports for doing trade, etc. That is the significance of Nepal to India and India to Nepal. That's the context. Okay. So is this point clear? एक broad है, थोड़ा सा detail में we'll go into. So that's there. You can write down about the significance of the India-Nepal relationship. देखिए, नेपाल इज नॉट अ वेरी स्मॉल कंट्री, ये पहले बता दूं. भूटान के लिए बोला था मैंने, नेपाल के लिए शब्द यूज नहीं किया है मैंने. नेपाल इज नॉट अ स्मॉल कंट्री. It is extended in the east-west fashion. That doesn't mean it's a small country. It is almost the size of Bangladesh. Almost the size of Bangladesh. Like, sir, but Bangladesh is a small country. Bangladesh is not a small country. Bangladesh size is almost equivalent to the territorial size of France. It's not a small country. India shares such a long border with बांग्लादेश. उसी से आपको समझ में आया 3000 किलोमीटर से ज्यादा लंबा बॉर्डर है, तो इतना तो लंबा होगा ना. Almost 3900 4000 kilometers. So what I'm trying to say is these are not small countries. They are sizable in terms of Bhutan. Nepal is also sizable in terms of size as well as population. You've seen the movie 14 Peaks? नहीं, देख लीजिए नेटफ्लिक्स पे डॉक्यूमेंट्री है ना. जब आपको लगे कि जीवन में और क्या करना है तो ये देख लीजिए. इट्स अबाउट अ नेपाली माउंटेनियर who is the first one in the world to climb the top 14 peaks in the world in a matter of 6 months. Okay. So I forget the name, but it's apparently a very big deal. Okay. So it's a good one. I mean, if you want to watch कि आप जीवन में और क्या क्या कर सकते हैं, ये देखने के बाद मैंने डिसाइड किया कि मैं किसी माउंटेन के बेस कैंप तक तो एक बार जीवन में हो ही आऊंगा. ये तो चढ़ गया 14, तो बेस कैंप तक ही चले जाए. सो significance of the India-Nepal relationship, you can write that Nepal is of a huge strategic significance to India, given its proximity, given its location between India and China. In other words, Nepal is a buffer between the two Asian between the two Asian giants. In other words, Nepal is a buffer between the two Asian giants. Now, a strong India-Nepal relationship, would allow India to deal with possible Chinese assertion elsewhere along the long undemarcated India-China border. Whereas India's importance to Nepal stems from A, the landlocked nature of Nepal and its location south of the Himalayas India's importance to Nepal stems from the landlocked nature of Nepal and its location south of the Himalayas, which makes it dependent on India for access to sea and trade. 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 Second is the point where Nepali citizens find huge employment and residential employment and residential opportunities in India in sizable numbers. For example, 35,000 Nepali soldiers serve in the Gorkha regiment of Indian Army, and more than 1.5 million Nepali citizens find employment opportunities in India, given the open border maintained between the two. देखिए, fencing of borders through what? Fencing, is there any fence on the India-China border? कितना बनाओगे? छोटा मोटा बना लिया. If you look in South Asia, forget South Asia for a minute, फिर हम इमोशनल हो जाते हैं. Emotional people, forget South Asia. Mexico and US and Canada. Trump said बनाएंगे वॉल. क्या हुआ वॉल का? बन गई? नहीं बनी. वो इलेक्शन जीत गया, हो गया. US and Canada, do they have a wall? France and Germany, do they have a wall? अरे टूट गई वो. The Berlin Wall is gone, right? Ukraine and Russia, do they have a wall? Wall बनाना आसान नहीं है. The reason being it is expensive to construct. Secondly, wall is not going to solve anything. Okay, that is why, for example, while the India-Bangladesh border is fenced and the India-Pakistan border is fenced, but India-Bhutan and India-Nepal border is not fenced, nor are they going to be fenced. Fencing तो ये दिल को दिलासा देने वाली बात है थोड़ा बहुत, ठीक है, और ऐसा लगना चाहिए कि सरकार कुछ कर रही है. क्या कर रहे हो? बाड़ा लगा दिया. गाय भाग जाएगी, बाड़ा लगा दो. Right? So often governments do things primarily to showcase that they're doing something. It doesn't mean that it is actually going to solve any problem or it is meant to solve any problem. There is a reason why India and Nepal have not constructed any fence, because of this particular reason, that maintaining an open border is one thing. It doesn't mean that if you're not constructing a fence, there will be no surveillance along the border. There are the integrated checkposts where any amount of trade which is happening has to be scanned to ensure that there's no drug trafficking, human trafficking and all those things across borders. But you see, with certain countries, we follow a very open border approach. We are saying, आओ और यहाँ नौकरी ढूंढ लो. With others, not so much. Okay. Now, and we'll see that this partly adds to the fact that because so many Nepali citizens find employment in India, there is reason for Nepali politicians to be cautious in antagonizing whom? India, beyond a point. Because ultimately, who will turn against them? The Nepali citizens, as we'll see happened in the case of 2015 Madhesi blockade in the Terai regions of Nepal. So this is the region where one could say is India's importance to Nepal and Nepal's importance to India. Now, the next thing that I want to discuss with you is a brief historical significance of the relationship or historical evolution. ये बहुत simple है क्योंकि सब बता चुका हूं मैं. 1949 CPC, China, Tibet. The same very next year, in 1950, India and Nepal signed a what? Friendship treaty. However, this friendship treaty, देखिए नेपाल की पॉलिटिक्स में क्या था at this time? There was the king, okay, King Tribhuvan, name not important. Nepali kings and Nepali prime ministers who came from the Ranas. Ye prime minister is not elected. In fact, this prime minister is appointed by the king. ठीक है? This prime minister is appointed by the king and it is a monarchy. It is not a republic or multi-party election. Nothing is happening in Nepal. But in Nepal, there is also at this time what? Nepali Congress. This is not a branch of Indian Congress. Okay. But there is the Nepali Congress also in 1950s in Nepal. In fact, the Nepali Congress members had good relations with the Indian National Congress. And just when India demanded independence from the British, the Nepali Congress was demanding that the monarchy in Bhutan, in Nepal, must be removed and Nepal must become a democracy. Who supported Nepali Congress? Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress was ruling India in 1950s. So this is the subtext of the relationship. But who was ruling Nepal? The monarchy and the Ranas, who were the prime ministers. Now, in 1950, when this friendship treaty was signed, the Ranas were the ones who signed this friendship treaty. The Ranas were the ones who had the major power in their hands, and they signed this friendship treaty with whom? India. Why? Because they are partly concerned about the Chinese aggression. But the Ranas are also aware of the relations between whom? The Indian National Congress and the Nepali Congress. So the Ranas were trying to do two things. One is to keep the Chinese out. The other, to ensure that the Nepali Congress does not capture power in Nepal. Okay, so that's the context. So ye inki politics, domestic politics and foreign policy is closely intertwined. Okay, that if they secure good relations with whom? If the Ranas secure good relations with the independent Indian government, then there is a possibility that whom? The government of India will not support Nepali Congress too much. And that will be good for the rule of the Ranas and the monarchy in Nepal. That's the context. They're trying to hit two birds with one stone. Okay. ऐसा होता है. Domestic politics and international politics, or domestic politics and foreign policy are often interlinked. It is very widely agreed upon partly that in 2014, when Putin annexed Crimea, it was a time when his popularity was partly declining in Russia, and by annexing Crimea, his popularity received a boost. In 1971, when Indira Gandhi won the 1971 war, she followed it up quickly with elections in 9 states, and she won all the 9 states. ठीक है. Winning wars is a way of winning popularity. And that popularity, if it is a democracy, may translate into votes. If it is not, then also your popularity will increase. But the risk is, if you lose the war, your popularity declines. And in fact, it is a commonly observed phenomena in international relations that if a leader finds his domestic position weakening, he or she may resort to launching wars against third countries and strengthening his domestic position if he wins wars. The same is the pattern with Pakistan. I think today or tomorrow, there is a no confidence motion against Imran Khan in Pakistan. Now Imran Khan must demonstrate that he is a strong leader. But unke papa baithe hain abhi, who is also a strong leader here, India mein. So he can't do much with India right now, because yahan walon ko bhi mauka hi chahiye. तुम थोड़ा सा तो करो, हम सब लेके आते. ठीक है, तो अब तो इलेक्शन हो गए, नहीं होता तो और है ना. तो वन थिंग इज ही इज गोइंग टू फाइंड इट हिमसेल्फ इन अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट सिचुएशन, because there is no possibility of starting a limited strike against India. The last time they did so, it didn't work out that great, right? And India sent a clear message in Balakot and all that कि भाई तुम एक करोगे तो हम भी करेंगे, हमको भी फायदा है, तुमको भी फायदा. Okay, so that is it. So all that means that when the domestic position of the Ranas was weak, they said that let's secure relations with India by signing a friendship treaty that will keep them possibly away from whom? That will keep them possibly away from the Nepali Congress. तो ये बड़ी complicated कहानी थी. But the friendship treaty was signed. Now in this friendship treaty, firstly, the open border was not started. ये तो पहले से था. The open border idea existed from which times? British times, it is partly being reasserted that open border in terms of finding employment or residence, which will apply reciprocally on both sides, meaning Indians can also go and find employment in Nepal or even residence or even property. Residence का मतलब ही property है. I'm just making it explicit. And an open border was reasserted. However, under Article 5 of the treaty, it was also said that Nepal would purchase arms from whom? India. Nepal would purchase arms from India and only when India cannot supply the arms, it could, only when India could not supply arms, it could purchase it from whom? Third countries. It could purchase it from third countries. And it must inform India. Inform का मतलब क्या हुआ? परमिशन ले लो हमसे. Parents tell you, inform. They don't want you to inform, they want you to seek their permission. Inform before you go on a short trip. है ना? So they don't want information, they seek that the idea that you seek permission from them, right? Now, basically, you see that this is what is said. Now, this is a arms treaty, this was as a part of the secret letters of the arms treaty. It is indirectly signaling to whom? Nepal. That what? That while engaging any kind of defense relationship with third countries, read what? China. Third country hai kaun? China. Okay. You should seek, or China, or in case of Bhutan, in case of Nepal, eventually there was an event also when they bought arms from Pakistan. Okay. So from third countries, before you buy arms, you should seek permission from India. And though it legitimized the whole idea of the open border once again. Now, once this treaty was signed, the same things that happened. 62 war and all those things. But by 1962 war, यहाँ पे जो king थे, okay, I'm not telling you the details, but there is King Tribhuvan, then King Tribhuvan's son, King Mahendra. Okay, Mahendra, Birendra, Gyanendra, बहुत सारे इंद्र हैं, ठीक है, कोई जरूरत नहीं है. Important thing is, when the 1962 war, India-China war was happening, Nepal said, in who was defeated? India. Nepal said, Nepal will follow a policy of non-alignment vis-a-vis whom? India and China. Bhutan never said so, but Nepal said it will follow a policy of non-alignment. हमें भी तो बहुत अच्छी लगती है policy of non-alignment ना. Nepal would follow a policy of non-alignment with respect to India and Nepal. Sorry, between India and China. इसके बाद जो यहाँ पे इनकी मोनार्की थी, they started this practice of saying that India is interfering in their domestic activities. India is supporting the Nepali Congress. India wants to throw away the monarchy. Okay. So India is the big brother. And the story started from 1962 onwards. Then you see the next major set of activities happened in Nepal would follow a policy of non-alignment with respect to India and China. In 1980s, in late 1980s, especially 1986, late 1980s, there was the Jan Andolan one. If you let's not call this because the later phase of this Jan Andolan. In 1986, there were popular anti-monarchical protests. Where? In Nepal. Why were there anti-monarchical protests in Nepal? Because of things which don't matter in India anymore. Unemployment, inflation, low growth rates. There were anti-monarchical protests. Who supported these protests? Nepali Congress led many of these protests. It is at this time that the king, the monarchy in Bhutan, asked India to supply arms. Okay, they asked India to supply arms. And it was very much evident that these arms would be used to crush the protests. India refused to supply the arms. It is at this time that Nepal bought anti-aircraft guns and tanks, a couple of them, anti-aircraft guns and some missiles, some tanks from China. China supplied them. Okay, China has no problem anyways with, no love for democracy. ऐसा तो है नहीं China को. China supplied the arms. The Indian Foreign Secretary KPS Menon issued a formal statement to Nepal that Nepal must not take its territorial integrity for granted. मतलब क्या हुआ? That ऐसा नहीं है कि if you buy arms from China, we will keep sitting. We can annex you any day. Don't take your territorial integrity for granted that India will not do anything. Please understand, why would India not supply arms? Because if these arms are used to crush popular protests, killing civilians, then there will be a negative sentiment against India. And India is threatening, it is point blank threatening Nepal, do not mess with us. Okay. Because this is a formal statement not made by a politician, but it is a statement being made by the foreign service people. So this statement was only a signal to Nepal. Nepali politicians loved this. They are like, look, India is the big brother. They are threatening us with annexation. Nepal needs a strong leader, right? So that is there. And the same story was again repeated in 1992. This time, this was called the Jan Andolan 1. And here, there is the Nepali Congress and there are who? The Maoists, who were a part of, again, the anti-monarchical protests. Following this anti-monarchical protest, the monarchy said, ki, okay, from monarchy we will become constitutional monarchy. After the Jan Andolan 1, monarchy said, we will become constitutional, monarchy will have elections, etc. But a couple of years later, they revoked the parliament. देखिए, मैं आपको बता रहा हूं. In 15 years, 17 times government changed in Nepal. लोगों ने ट्रैक ही रखना छोड़ दिया. मैंने तो बहुत ही पहले छोड़ दिया था कि किसकी सरकार आ रही है और किसकी जा रही है. ठीक. If you look at Pakistan, I think before Imran Khan, I'm very sure, there has not been a single prime minister in Pakistan's 60-year history who has completed one term. 2 term nahi, 1 term.
उसके पहले वो कू, मिलिट्री कू हो ही जाती है। अभी इमरान खान का समय आ रहा है। बाजवा हैज सेड, और इफ व्हाटएवर कयानी हैज सेड कि भाई आर्मी ने बोल दिया अभी हो गया तुम्हारा, तो फिर हो गया, राइट? द सेम अप्लाइज टू नेपाली। After Jan Andolan 1, when the first government came, it did not complete its tenure. And since then, no Nepali prime minister has ever completed a 5-year tenure. It tells you about the extent of political instability in Nepal. Okay. So, Jan Andolan 1 saw a brief coming in of democracy, but it again failed. In 96 में कौन? केपी ओली, ये वही केपी ओली हैं जो आज प्रधानमंत्री हैं. Okay, he started his political journey somewhere here, and India had signed an agreement in 1996. No, KP Oli says, sorry, KP Oli did not start his journey, but KP Oli remembers. He said that I remember that in 1996, India signed the Pancheshwar Dam project. ये जो project है, this Pancheshwar Dam project agreement was signed between whom? India and Nepal in 1996. This is a 5,000 megawatt dam project. This is not completed even today. आज क्या मतलब अभी भी है, अभी क्या अगले 10 साल भी नहीं होने वाला कंप्लीट है. तो केपी ओली said that I remember as a young adolescent that India and Nepal signed the Pancheshwar Dam, और जब से अब वो प्रधानमंत्री बन गए पर ये डैम अभी भी नहीं बना है. ठीक है. तो as we'll see that there are many challenges in India Nepal hydropower cooperation, but the potential is immense. One challenge is political instability in Nepal. आप एक के साथ अग्रीमेंट साइन करिए, दूसरा वाला आके बोलता है ये तो the previous government signed this agreement with India because they had sold Nepal's interest to India. We will revisit the agreement. हमारे यहां ऐसा नहीं होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, फॉर ऑल द बिकरिंग बिटवीन whom the political parties like the BJP or the Congress, India signed the civil nuclear deal with US under Manmohan Singh. But no government since then, 2008, India and US signed the civil nuclear deal. But it is not that after coming to power in 2014, the Modi administration has said कि नहीं, we'll revoke the civil nuclear deal with US. There is a certain degree of continuity in foreign policy in mature democracies. Okay, क्या ऐसा नहीं है कि दूसरी पार्टी आई और बोला कि अरे नहीं कल से यूएस से ट्रेड बंद. This is not how foreign policy is conducted. But in Nepal, there is this tendency that every new politician who comes to power says there is a need to revisit all agreements. पहले तो we are slow in implementing. Who? Indians. On top of that, Nepali political crisis makes situations even worse. Okay. So one thing missing in India-Nepal relation, which is present in India-Bhutan, is political continuity, which is important to ensure what? A smooth completion of projects. There are other problems also in hydropower cooperation, but ये चलता रहा. इसके बाद देर इज जन आंदोलन. इसके बीच में क्या हुआ? बीच में एकदम फुल फिल्मी कहानी है. ज्ञानेंद्र एंड बीरेंद्र, देयर इज वन मिस्टर बीरेंद्र. इन 2002 देयर इज अ रॉयल पैलेस मैसाकर इन Kathmandu, where one family member got high and killed all other family members of the royal family and shot himself also, and ended the monarchical rule in Nepal. Only one family member did not come to that day's royal dinner, and he went on to become the next king of and the last king of Nepal. ठीक है, कोई हम नहीं जा रहे हैं सब कहानी सुनने नहीं आए, एग्जाम फोकस पढ़ने. But 2002 there is a royal palace massacre, and in Nepal, and in 2005 there is the Jan Andolan second, following which monarchy was abolished completely in Nepal. once monarchy was abolished, it was clear that now it will be what? By the way, the Jan Andolan too was primarily led by Maoists and the Nepali Congress. Maoists and whom? The Nepali Congress. Once this Jan Andolan succeeded, then began the bigger headache. Maoists had armed fighting units. So once they overthrew the monarchy, पहले एक बड़ा क्वेश्चन था what to do with these Maoists, because their cadre had arms, or they were armed fighting units. So firstly, was the Maoist cadre had to put down arms, okay, and then Maoist politicians became a part of what? A constituent assembly. देखिए अभी तो इन्होंने बोला ना कि हम रिपब्लिक बनाएंगे, अब रिपब्लिक बनाने के लिए आपको लिखना पड़ेगा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, ठीक है. So in 2007 a constituent assembly was formed in Nepal on the basis of an election conducted in Nepal, and from 2007 to 2015 Nepal took 7 years to draft a constitution, and it drafted a pathetic constitution. Okay. So 2007 to 2015, it was a 7-year of tumultuous journey for Nepal, where after repeated failed attempts, they did draft a constitution which was finally adopted in 2015. 2 मेजर अटेम्प्ट हुए थे, 3 मेजर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के ड्राफ्ट बनाए, हर ड्राफ्ट में कुछ चेंजेस एक्सेट्रा. इवेंचुअली इंडिया ड्राफ्टेड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन इन हाउ मेनी इयर्स? 3 इयर्स मोटा मोटा, 47 से गिन लिया 50 तक, 2-3 इयर्स जो भी, इनको 7 साल लग गए. ओके, इनके इफ यू कंपेयर देयर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, देन मोदी जी वेंट इन 2015, in 2014, sorry, after Bhutan, Modi ji, the next country that he went to was Nepal. When he visited Nepal, and Nepal was in the process of drafting its constitution, he gave a copy of the Indian constitution to the Nepali side, that you can learn something from how to draft a constitution. But Nepalis did not do the right job in drafting a constitution. Many in India today say we should also make a new constitution. Just to give you some context, if you look at the educational qualification of the members of the Indian Constituent Assembly and compare today, there is no comparison. We are far ahead now. There is no turning back. कंपेयर कर लीजिए आप उनके एजुकेशनल क्वालिफिकेशंस को और इनके, है ना. इनके क्या, इनके आसपास जितने उनको भी जोड़ लीजिए, नहीं है. ओके, सो राइटिंग अ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन इज नॉट अ वेरी इजी प्रोसेस. इट इज विजिबल इन द केस ऑफ नेपाल. एंड व्हेन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वाज adopted in 2015, Nepal adopted a new constitution. देखिए, आप श्रीलंका का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन देख लीजिए. आपको श्रीलंका का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन पढ़ के यही नहीं समझ में आएगा इट इज अ पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम और अ प्रेसिडेंशियल सिस्टम. इट इज ऑल्सो अ वेरी पैथेटिकली डिजाइन्ड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. देखिए, एक होता है पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम, द वन विच इज इन इंडिया. यू हैव अ elected members coming to the parliament. The party which has the largest seats in the parliament forms the government or appoints the prime minister. All powers are in the hands of prime minister and his council of ministers. President जो होता है is a nominal head. If you look in Sri Lanka, वहां पे president के पास बहुत powers हैं and PM के पास भी बहुत powers हैं. President का भी direct election होता है, पार्लियामेंट का भी डायरेक्ट इलेक्शन होता है. इन केस ऑफ इंडिया, प्रेसिडेंट इज इलेक्टेड इनडायरेक्टली, whereas parliament members and prime minister is elected directly. वहां पे president can impose emergency without consulting prime minister. President can remove prime minister also. यही नहीं समझ में आता उनका कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन पढ़ के कि सर आप प्रेसिडेंशियल हैं कि आप पार्लियामेंट्री हैं. अमेरिका इज अ प्रेसिडेंशियल कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, ठीक है. where Mr. Trump or Obama or Biden, they are elected, right? So it's a presidential system. Whereas many of other constitutions, मैं ये बोल रहा हूँ, people think that constitution is something which can be drafted with very ease, agreed upon and implemented. Okay, we have the habit of taking things which happened in India rightly for granted. If you look in South Asia, you will find no other example. Forget South Asia. If you look in Asia and Africa, between 1945 to 1960, 50 countries attained independence. You can't point out 5 countries to me which have a functional constitution and an uninterrupted transfer of power for 60 years. Even India witnessed a brief disruption when the emergency was imposed from 77 to 2 years, but then still sense of normalcy prevailed and we're back to a democratic process where by and large the constitution is followed in letter, though the spirit at times may waver here and there, but by and large it is followed. So it is also a very big achievement. And Nepal's, when the new constitution was adopted in 2015, what happened? India issued a statement. India noted. India did not congratulate Nepal. ठीक है, जहां शब्द यूज हो जाए ना, पूरी दुनिया congratulated Nepal on adopting a new constitution. India said, we have taken note of Nepal's adoption of a new constitution. And as India took note, there was large scale Madhesi protests. Where? In the Terai region against the 2015 constitution. Because the Madhesis were underrepresented in the legislative assemblies. The Madhesis were underrepresented in the federal structure, and Madhesis were underrepresented in the federal structure, and the Madhesis were barred from Madhesis who were naturalized citizens. The Madhesis who were naturalized citizens, they were barred. Naturalized citizens, they were barred from occupying constitutional positions like that of the Chief Justice of High Court, the President, etc. Were barred from acquiring constitutional positions. So basically, in one lines, Madhesis under the new constitution were politically underrepresented. Context समझाता हूं मैं आपको अभी. ये तो आपने लिख लिया ना, अभी मैं आपको इसका बता देता हूं कि क्या समस्या क्या है इनकी और इनकी समस्या हमारी समस्या क्यों है. Almost 60%, more than 60% of Nepal's population lives where? in the Terai region. And more than 60% of the Nepal's population lives in the Terai region. A large part of it is composed of whom? Madhesis and the Tharu Janjatis. Basically, the Janjatis are the tribal population, and the Madhesis are also the local population of the Terai region. They live where? In the plains, and they constitute more than 60% of the population of Nepal. Now, when the new constitution was being drafted, पहले तो यही debate थी within Nepal, whether Nepal should have a unitary structure or a federal structure. Unitary structure मतलब there is only one level of government. Federal structure means there are two levels of government. One is central, the other is state. Many people commonly assume that just because there are two levels, central and state, that is federal. That is not federal. China is a unitary state. But in China also there are provincial governments. So unitary state का मतलब ये नहीं होता कि there is only one government and that is central government. Unitary state is where the central government is way more powerful, and the central government gives power to whom? State governments. And central government decide how much power state governments will have and can even withdraw powers from state. So central can give police or law and order to the state and can withdraw it also from the state if it wants. There is no clear cut division of powers, and the division of power, even if it is there, can be altered by whom? Center, unilaterally. अगर ये है तो ये यूनिटरी स्टेट, ठीक है. फेडरल में क्या है? सेंट्रल एंड anyways you'll study that in polity in greater detail, that in center, in federal structure we say central government and state governments are relatively equal to each other in terms of power also, and no one side can change the distribution of power अकेले. कि मोदी जी ने बोला कि नहीं अब ये लॉ एंड ऑर्डर जो है रिक्वायर्स अ स्ट्रॉन्ग लीडर, एंड स्टेट्स आर रूल्ड बाय करप्ट डायनेस्टी पॉलिटिशियंस, so I will take care of law and order in all states. Cannot do, because law and order according to the constitution is a power of state, and that distribution of power cannot be changed by any one party unilaterally. उसके लिए आपको क्या करना होगा? कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में जाके चेंज करना होगा, बिकॉज द डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ पावर्स इज रिटन इन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. Right? So that is there. Now it is in this context that this is what there was a debate in those 7 years. पहली debate ये थी कि unitary होना चाहिए कि federal. Who dominated the politics? The Bahun Kshetris. The Bahun Kshetris said we will have unitary constitution. The Madhesis and the Nepali Congress said no, we need to have a federal constitution. ठीक है. India has which structure, unitary or federal? Federal. You'll study in polity. India has largely a federal structure. Okay. So when the debate happened first on unitary and federal, while the hill elites wanted unitary, eventually it was decided that there has to be a federal structure. Okay. And as you will study later, you will see that federalism is very important because it accommodates what? It accommodates diversity. क्या diversity? Any diversity. Linguistic diversity, geographical diversity, economic diversity, or any other diversity as well. What federalism? कैसे? How? If you look at Himachal Pradesh, its economy is based on, it is a largely forested region, mountainous region. If you compare that with Madhya Pradesh, it is in plains. If you compare that with Kerala, coast. So Kerala's economy will be based on coastal shipping, fisheries, etc. Madhya Pradesh's economy may be largely based on, say, agriculture or certain other things. And Himachal's economy may be largely based on either forestry or tourism or other things. Depending on the diversity in India, different regions will need different methods of economic planning and will need implementation, also keeping in mind the different peculiarities of every region. If you adopt, sir, we will have manufacturing led growth in Himachal Pradesh also, in Madhya Pradesh also, in Kerala also, then what will happen? You cannot have one common policy for all parts of India. Why? Because it is a mountainous hill region. Okay, if you do manufacturing led growth, you will clear forest. That will cause landslides. Neither manufacturing will happen and loss of lives will also happen. So depending on different regions will have different diversities and will do their economic planning on their own and then implement their plans on their own. So depending on, for example, I took the example of regional diversity. Similarly, language. If you look at language, if you say, for example, in Maharashtra, if education has to be given, where? In primary schools, in the local language, then they would probably want to give the education in Marathi. If the same is to apply in Punjab, they would probably want to do it in Punjabi, in Malayalam, in Kerala, or Tamil, in Tamil Nadu. So, Government of India says one unitary government will have one education policy, will impart primary education to all Indians in one language. It will not work. Okay. Who tried to do though? Pakistan, and that created two countries out of one, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Pakistan said only one official language, Urdu, and Bengali people will also learn primary education in Urdu. Bengali people like, we'll form our own country. Pakistan had a unitary constitution to begin with. To accommodate diversity, you need federal constitution where states enjoy considerable autonomy. Autonomy of whom? Center. Autonomy है किससे बात हो रही है? Center से. Division of power हो क्यों रहा है? So that the states can operate autonomously of center, not independently of center. ये शब्द autonomy बड़ा डेंजरस शब्द है. आप बोलेंगे कि सर आप कह रहे हैं कि भारत के टुकड़े टुकड़े हो जाएं, यही सिखा रहे हैं आप यहां? नहीं. Autonomy is a different word than independence. So while states continue to be autonomous, they need to be guided by one common center. So this is a complicated relationship, but it is definitely where states are considered equal to center. तो ये क्यों बोला गया? Because the Terai people, ये पूरी कहानी आपको क्यों समझाई मैंने? Because the Terai people in the composition of Nepal, it is in the Terai people that whether it comes to jobs or roads or economy is relatively more underdeveloped as compared to where? Hills. Kathmandu is located in the hills. वहीं है रोड, सड़क, रेलवे, हाईवे, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी वहीं है. तेराई में कुछ नहीं है, ना रोड है, ना सड़क है, ना इलेक्ट्रिसिटी है, ना पानी है, पीने को कुछ नहीं है. So they said our region is lagging behind. We need a federal structure where the developmental needs of the plains people are not ignored. After long debate, it was decided, चलो कर देते हैं federal. So it is at this time that the Madhesi people said, ये जितना भी plains है, it must be made as one state. Okay, one unified Madhesi state in the east-west fashion. Okay. Now the hill elite said a no to this. They said ऐसा state तो हम बनाएंगे ही नहीं. Why? Because you Madhesis, you are anyways not Nepali. You are whom? Indians. Why are you Indians? Because it is only 1960s that this Terai population was granted citizenship in Nepal. उन्होंने अपना वो बनाया क्या? Citizenship Amendment. ठीक है. It is only 1960s that they granted citizenship to the Terai people formally. Before that, they said These Terai people are not Nepali people. They are settlers who have come from India and settled in Nepal. They are not Nepali. They are who? Indian agents. But चलो अब दे देते हैं citizenship. So first, when they brought in the new constitution, they said all these naturalized citizens who have been granted citizenship later. एक होता है citizenship by descent. But they said all naturalized citizens of Nepal, red Terai citizens, they cannot become whom? They cannot occupy constitutional positions in Nepal. So Prime Minister, President, Chief Justice, ये कोई office cannot go to Terai people automatically. तो उन्होंने बोला अरे ऐसे कैसे? In India, can naturalized citizens acquire constitutional positions? Yes. Right? Sonia Gandhi wanted to, but then never happened. Right? So that's another thing. Do Indians acquire positions in US? Indians, origin people who go there, citizenship लेके offices तो they can acquire. ओबामा के बारे में भी यही कहा था, अरे ये तो अफ्रीका से आया. Said about Obama when he stood for the, he is not American. The common rhetoric that goes on, but some countries have grown on the basis of immigration. One country which has grown with immigration, without doubt, is the United States. Right? It has managed to acquire talent and attract talent from all over the world. So much so, as I often say to Indians, with no offense, that Indians don't have 4 dhams, they have 5 dhams. The 5th dham is US. को जाना सबको वही है, राइट? उदित नारायण के गाने वहां सुन लेंगे, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, राइट? So that is there. So one of the things is this, that here, one, they demanded a unified Madhesi state spanning east and west. The Hill elite said no. उन्होंने दो ऐसे नहीं बनाएंगे. What we'll do is we'll create states not in east-west fashion. We'll create states in northwest fashion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So they've created 7 states in Nepal under a new constitution, 7 federal units. 5 of them are clearly in a north-south fashion. 1 is in the east-west, or 2 are in the east-west fashion. What has happened is that under these created states, there are almost 120, almost 140 seats. There are almost, one could say, there are almost 200 seats in the Nepali parliament, and 100 more than 130 of these seats are in the hills. Parliament में, जो central parliament होता है. पहले तो उन्होंने, they've created these 7 states. In these 7 states, most of the seats are where? In the hills, and fewer seats are in the plains. तो ये कहते हैं ना, जो उसको delimitation of constituencies within a state. You decide कि अगर, say for example, if you were to say that Uttar Pradesh, okay, for example, abhi Uttar Pradesh elections happened, so Uttar Pradesh had 400 seats. Within Uttar Pradesh, how do you divide seats? That's called delimitation. Or within Uttar Pradesh, there are 80 Lok Sabha seats, so वो 80 seats कैसे divide हो रही हैं? Which regions? So here they divided seats in a manner that most seats are where? In the hills, and fewer seats are in the plains. Clearly what is happening is that the Terai people are being underrepresented in the parliament at the central level also, and they had demanded one unified Madhesi state and what they eventually got was only one small Madhesi state on the eastern side. Clearly in this new constitution, the design has been to keep what? Madhesi is out of power. And so who's not happy? The Madhesi. And thus the Madhesis resorted to a protest. वहां उन्होंने न्यू कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अडॉप्ट किया. कहां? काठमांडू में. India said we have noted the adoption of the new process of the new constitution, and the Madhesis imposed and violence erupted in the Madhesi region. Violence erupted in the Madhesi region, following which what happened? This is where in 2015. अब तो पार्टी शुरू हुई है, right? Violence erupted in the Madhesi region. What? Trucks from India carrying food, oil, etc. They stopped going into Nepal because of violence in the Madhesi region. This situation lasted for 2 months. For 2 months, there was no major supply of goods happening through India into Nepal or into Kathmandu. Whether it is supply of oil, India gave the argument that there is large scale violence in Terai region and we cannot supply, for example, oil, etc. because of violence. There is a threat to the life of any Indian or suppliers also. It is unsafe. Only when there is political stability we will resume supplies. It is not, India was explaining that we are not cutting off supplies. It is the violence which is preventing supplies from being resumed. The Nepali elite said, Dekha, India is cutting off supplies. They said, look, they did similar in Bhutan. They are doing the same to us. Nepal is not landlocked. Nepal is India locked. Nepal needs a strong leader. For 2 months, and it is at this time when a new constitution came. KP Oli came from which party? The Communist Party of Nepal. The Communist Party of Nepal में division भी हो गया था, लेकिन broadly he came from the Communist Party of Nepal, which were the erstwhile Maoists. KP Oli is the Prime Minister in 2015 when a blockade is imposed because of the Madhesi protests. India said India did not impose the blockade. It is why we argue that it is a Madhesi blockade and that India is not responsible for this blockade. Firstly, Nepali elite said that look, India is enforcing the blockade. Anyways, these Madhesis are whom? Indian agents. ठीक है, एकदम सही स्टोरी चल रहा है. It is at this time that KP Oli went ahead and entered into talks with China. And while oil was not coming from India and there were huge fuel shortages, LPG shortages, cooking oil भी नहीं आ रहा है, cooking fuel भी नहीं आ रहा है, oil भी नहीं आ रहा है. China airlifted oil supplies to Kathmandu. Now, while blockade was happening from the Indian side, China airlifted oil supplies to Kathmandu, and this is a big deal. The airlifting of the oil supplies is not going to solve Nepal's oil problem. अरे भैया, plane से कितना तेल ले आओगे? But it was a huge symbolic gesture that while Nepal is India locked on the one side, who's Nepal's friend? China. Who's ruling in Nepal? The Communist Party. Who's ruling in China? The Communist Party of China. Who's ruling in Nepal? The Communist Party of Nepal. India said, yes, साले Communist Party. This is a danger. In addition to the fact that Nepali politicians have always played the China card, these communist people are even more closer to China. And that is a matter of concern for India. But for 2 months the blockade lasted. China airlifted a certain number of commodities to Nepal, and in Kathmandu there was a clear negative public sentiment against whom? India. Very strong Indian flags were burnt in Nepal in 2015 in Kathmandu. ठीक है, तो तब की बात है जब इंडिया had already newly attained independence and India had a strong lead. 2015. But all of this happened. अब क्या हुआ? The very next moment In the same year, what happened? Earthquake. The Nepal earthquake. Okay, we in India forget earthquakes. We in India forget almost every other calamity very quickly. I remember 2012, 13, 14, 12, I think the Uttarakhand floods happened. 12, I think, right? 13, the Uttarakhand floods happened. According to every other average Indian, I am pretty sure everybody has forgotten about Uttarakhand floods. More than 10,000 people apparently died in the Uttarakhand floods. There are so many people died that people stopped looking for dead people. Right? 2015, there's the earthquake in Nepal. It's a very high degree earthquake. Completely shatters Nepal, including Kathmandu. And within 30 minutes of the the Kathmandu earthquake, India airlifted supplies as well as started rescue operations in Nepal. India supplied food, water, and rescue operations in Nepal. Before Nepali government could respond, it was Indian government who responded. The same Nepali citizens who were burning Indian flags 6 months ago, now said that they are glad about their friendship with India. Long story cut short, India regained a certain amount of lost ground with the earthquake in Nepal. But this doesn't settle. Oli is still the Prime Minister. Oli government fell. Why? Because there's a split in the Communist Party. And there is KP Oli and there's Prachanda. Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist faction. के Prachanda leader थे. Prachanda withdrew support from KP Oli and KP Oli's government fell in 2016. KP Oli said, who has engineered the fall of his government? India. 2016, his government fell. 2017, next fresh election happened. KP Oli came back with bigger majority. And as Oli came back, he said, we will engage whom? China in a big way. He signed a couple of memorandum of understandings. Since then, China has talked about building a railway line up to Kathmandu. China is constructing 4 major dams in Nepal. China is constructing the Pokhara airport in Nepal. China is constructing the parliament. China wants to construct the parliament in Japan. China wants to construct the parliament in Nepal. China has constructed the Nepali Police Academy in Nepal. Chinese language is being taught in Nepal. In 2017, China narrowly overcame India to send the maximum number of tourists to Nepal. There is the Buddhism Connect, Lumbini, and all of that. Right? So, Chinese ground is increasing in Nepal. China has also shown the inclination very openly to be a part of Belt and Road Initiative. Nepal has shown the inclination to be a part of Belt and Road Initiative. Nepal has said that we will do trade with China. We will build railway lines with China. But यहीं पे मैं आपको बता देता हूं कि फिर क्या प्रॉब्लम क्या है. ज्योग्राफी. एक तो ज्योग्राफी है, दूसरा इकोनॉमिक्स है. Please understand, for Nepal to have an alternative sea route through China, they have to go from where? Tibet. So, पहले तो railways will have to be constructed. By the way, from Lhasa, and I'll give you the handout, so you can see there, from Lhasa to Giring, which is just on whose border? Nepal's border. The railway line has already been constructed. बन गई है यहाँ तक. बना दिया उन्होंने. China ने. ठीक है. Now they have to cross whom? Himalaya. है ना? So please understand, this is a plateau. You have to understand. From यहाँ से एकदम से when the Himalayas rise steeply, 8,000 meters above, there is a plateau there. From there to come from this side is the trick. Okay. Now, what is happening is that from here to Kathmandu is merely 150 kilometers. hypothetically speaking, if this is, it is going to be extremely expensive to construct this, by the way, because a number of tunnels have to be dug through mountains and it is going to be extremely expensive. But even if it is constructed, then also, then the idea is what? How is trade going to happen? That from here, from Lhasa, elsewhere, through mainland China and through the coast of China, they can do trade with third countries. But this route is at least 2 to 3 times longer than India coast, right? In Calcutta or elsewhere. So firstly, the route is longer if they are going to go to China. Secondly, the Chinese will export to whom? Nepal, using the railways. But the railway containers which come from China to Nepal carrying Chinese goods and entering into Nepal, these trains will have to go back empty largely to Nepal. Will have to go back empty largely to China. Arey, what will Nepal export to China? हमसे नहीं हो पा रहा है China को export. You have to understand, an economy must have a competitive edge over the other economy to offer something in exports, right? Chinese will buy only goods from India when Indian goods are either better in quality or cost as compared to whom? Chinese. Now, that is something that India finds it difficult because the number of tariff and non-tariff barriers in, and those things are for an India-China discussion. But many countries run a negative balance of payment with whom? China, or negative export-import relationship with China. There is nothing that Nepal can export to China in feasible amount. ऐसा भी नहीं है, iron ore भी नहीं है China, Nepal के पास. Nepal doesn't have enough raw materials also that it can export to China. So even if this route is constructed, even if they take the longer trade route, it is an unviable trade route, economically speaking. तो नेपाल ने बोला रुको रुको. Nepal gave the formula of what they called 2+1. Nepal said we are one. Who are two? India and China. They said, what if we extend this trade route, we extend the rail line from Kathmandu to India. Then Nepal will serve as a connecting bridge. Nepal, that is one, will serve as a connecting bridge between China and India. Okay. So, and this will make the trade route viable because the train which is coming from China will drop some goods in Kathmandu, then head for India, and opposite. Who will make this trade route viable? India. But India will not join Belt and Road Initiative. खत्म हो गया. बना लो तुम रेल लाइन, कुछ भी, अभी नहीं होने वाला है कुछ, ठीक है. But we should be aware about what is happening in the region. On the contrary, what India has said, we will construct the rail line from Raxaul in India to Kathmandu. Is it easy to do so? Yes, because Kathmandu is in the foothills of the Himalayas and the Terai region is plains. आराम से रेलवे लाइन बन जाएगा. Geography favors whom? बट बनाया क्या इंडिया ने? नहीं. प्रपोजल किसने दिया? फर्स्ट चाइना गेव द प्रपोजल ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टिंग द रेलवे अक्रॉस द हिमालयाज, देन इंडिया इज लाइक नहीं नहीं हम बनाएंगे. Often said about India's activities in South Asia is that India is not proactive in reaching out to the smaller neighbors. Only when Nepal plays the China card, India reacts. Okay, so you have to understand, for Nepal, a country like China is very useful because only when China starts paying attention to Nepal, India starts also paying attention. It is like Nepal is courting two partners. The moment Nepal tilts towards one partner, the other partner also starts paying attention. So yes, India has proposed, oh by the way, so India proposed the Raxaul-Kathmandu rail link, that's one. And it will be constructed sooner or later. अभी कब बनता है पता नहीं, but चल रहा है. In the meanwhile, we have actually constructed one thing. What is that? Pipeline. After the Madhesi blockade of 2015, India said we must construct an oil pipeline to supply oil all the way up to Kathmandu, so that in future oil supply is not disrupted and India is not wrongfully accused of disrupting oil supplies. In 2019, in 2018 or 19, Prime Minister Modi paid a visit to Kathmandu. Oil pipeline was inaugurated. Biratganj oil pipeline has been inaugurated, and we have constructed the oil pipeline to supply oil to Kathmandu. So some of these developments have happened, which are good developments. Some other, India has shown the inclination to develop, but the Chinese presence is very strongly present where? In Nepal, and is increasing day by day. While geography favors India, India must also not become complacent about what? Nepal. कि हाँ बस ठीक है क्योंकि हम you are south of the Himalayas and you have to depend on us, तो बस. Nepal is good at playing the China card. They have been playing it for a while and they will play it in the future as well. And Nepal is willing to support Chinese ambitions in South Asia because it allows them to hedge against whom? India. ठीक है, तो एक ब्रॉड कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. जो इस पे लिखना विकना है वो कल करते हैं, ठीक है. एंड we'll wrap this up in the first half an hour or 40 minutes of tomorrow's lecture, and then we'll carry forward next topics. Some of you have a class at 11 o'clock, some have a class at yeah, you'll have my class tomorrow also. For those people who cannot attend my class, I'll have a separate class for you also. वरना आपको वैसे भी it will be there on your portal also. Tomorrow I'll complete this discussion, and anybody has a pol science class also, is it? What time? 11, right? तो मैं तो 2 बजे से पढ़ा रहा हूँ. So just adjust for, I'll tell you, just adjust for two days. If you have to do a double class also, if you have a 11 o'clock class or a 5 o'clock class, because some of you may have a 5 o'clock class also, or whatever, just adjust for 2 days. Okay, let me complete 1 or 2 chunks and we'll do a class at 2 o'clock also, and then from the next week onwards we'll resume as you were carrying on before. I don't want to give a break elsewhere. 2 दिन तो आ ही सकते हैं आप, है ना? So just for 2 days, that's just for 2 days.